My name's William Berkeley, and first off, I want to thank you guys for putting all this together. This is amazing. Usually in some cities, they just come out and do it. So it's kind of nice to have this public forum. One thing I haven't heard, and I haven't seen it in your documents, is traffic control during construction. And right now, I live on the I-25 construction bypass route, which, if you don't know what that is from you take at the library, you turn onto the street, I can't think of the name of it right now. You come across that street, and then you come over to Edith. And what happens right now to construction is causing people to back up on Broadway to Garfield is the name of the street. And what they do is there's no stop signs on Garfield. So they turn there, they come flying down there 40 miles an hour, they hang a hard right, they shoot up Edith looking for the traffic light into Edith and Cesar Chavez. So school halfway up there, and me. And I say me because about a week ago, I was walking across the street, some guy made that turn, come up that street, I was 2/3 away across the street, he actually knocked my scooter out from underneath me. My Ring camera caught that, and in reference to the last century video game called Death Race 2000, I put it on YouTube as Death Race 2023. So if anybody wants to see that, they can see that. But I think it's a concern of how you're going to handle the traffic during the construction so it doesn't overflow into the residential areas.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. So just to make sure that I'm summarizing your question, you are asking our team, how are we going to manage traffic during the construction period? Is that correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm going to hand it over either to Mike or Alonzo. Which one do you guys want to answer? All right.
That's a really good question, and it's a relative one. Unfortunately, at this point, it's really early
Okay.
to say how that's going to be addressed. I think you can probably imagine to reconstruct a facility like this and maintain traffic is a bit of a magic trick in some ways. And it certainly will be here, as congested as this area is. But as we move on, and the more time I spend in my career, the more important it is to find ways to keep traffic moving during construction, and the more innovative approaches need to be found. So that's the only thing I can probably give to you tonight is that once we know more what we build, we're going to be looking at and not impacting the community unduly. It's almost impossible to do it without having inconveniences, certainly, and having traffic be affected. I've already heard from a number of people that whenever I-25 is impacted, whether partially or it's closed completely, that Broadway takes the brunt of it. I've heard that from a number of folks. So, and you're saying exactly the same thing I've already heard. So I appreciate that.
Okay, just thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, number 2.
Question number 2. My name's Jeff Starr. I live on High Street, right next to Cesar Chavez and I-25. A couple of my neighbors here are backed up houses right next to I-25. And sort of less of a question, more just comments. Again, I'll reiterate what he's doing. I'm glad you're asking these questions. And I pray that you don't move it an inch west because you'll displace many people. And there's a big empty lot east, and lots of APS buildings that can be moved onto that lot. So that would be my request there. And basically babying people as much as possible because nobody is looking at the road when they're driving anymore. Actually, in the study area on Cole, a lady ran a red light, hit me on my motorcycle 2 years ago. She was staring at her phone, ran the red light 10 miles an hour because she wasn't paying attention. So everything to make it easier on the drivers, longer freeway on-ramps, anything like that, go gung-ho with that. I just worry about, South Broadway is a poor area, and we don't get much attention. The rich areas in town, they got at least a sound wall. Meanwhile, we've got trucks semis hitting the engine brakes, waking me and my wife up at 2 a.m. So, yeah, just those are some of my comments. Less of a question, more just comments. Thank you. So yeah, I don't know who wants to reply to that, but thank you.
Yes, those are great comments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Mike.
We're going to attempt to strangle each other with this cord as we get on. We shuffled to try to not do that, and we're still doing it. There's a couple points that you brought up, and well, more than a couple, right? And one of the things that I think is important to say at the outset, we're at our first public meeting of several. And we're going to, as we move forward, there's going to be increasing levels of detail that we're going to present and alternatives that are refined to increasing levels and much more able to comment on it. I'm sure we'll receive quite a bit of feedback on those. As we move forward in a process such as this, and I would love to bring each of you along with this mindset, is that we will consider a full range of alternatives that, and I've heard, you're not the first person that said don't move, don't impact the neighborhoods to the west. And I appreciate that. I lived in that same area for the first year I lived in Albuquerque, so I'm kind of attached to it myself. But we will consider those things, because in order to make an informed decision, we have to consider all of the range of alternatives, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise, and to be able to make an informed decision. So please stick with us through that process. You also mentioned noise walls. Also, very persistent theme. I've been working on a project to the north of I-40 for the last 3 years, coming on 3 years now. And that is probably the most often received comment that we receive in that project, which isn't even where we're at, that we need noise walls in the neighborhood south of Lead and Coal, adjacent to. And I understand I had a bedroom window that was off of High Street as well, that I heard it too. So I get that. Part of the thing that is a part of our process, we will be doing a full noise study. And what that will entail is measuring noise levels today, near and adjacent to what we call receptors. That's an impersonal way to refer to somebody's home. But we will be taking noise measurements, and then as we get to the final alternative that we consider, that we will do modeling, computer modeling of what the noise levels are expected to be under future year, i.e. 2050 traffic volumes, and with the proposed location of the highway and the lanes. And then that will be assessed as to the extent, and I'm not naive to think that there's not some noise mitigation that's needed throughout the area. So I appreciate that comment, and I'm very sensitive to it. I haven't experienced it myself. Let's see, what was the other part of it? I think you said something about non-motorized. And I'm going over my time too. Sorry, Francine.
You're the PM. You can do what you
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's mostly it.
Okay. All right. Well, if you think of that, what's that?
Driver overload.
Oh, driver over. Yeah.
Distracted driver.
Yeah, you're right about that. So maybe it's just me, and hopefully not as a transportation professional, but whenever I drive through that section, I have to focus to stay between the white lines, right? And then there's all this other stuff going on about people weaving in and off, coming in and off of the ramps and crossing over in front. And then you have to make decisions. Am I in the right lane? I got to get off here. I got to be in the right lane to get the I-40 or whatever it is. There's just a ton of stuff happening right here. And so, and Ashley's the expert in this, but she has a station over there where it talks about driver overload or traveler overload. So it's relevant. So appreciate your comments. They're all really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 3.
Thank you. My name is Evaristo. I'm question number 3. And it's more along the lines of comments on the current alignment and some improvements that can be made to safety, because it is, as everybody knows, a madhouse when it comes to that section of the highway. And I take inspiration from a construction project that was similar in the San Francisco Bay Area in California when the Oakland Bay Bridge was being replaced. And there was a similar S-curve that was temporary. And the safety features of that could greatly reduce collisions, injury, fatalities. And they were as follows. There were polymer rumble strips, so that way the driver could have been audibly and physically alerted to the S-curve coming up, as well as increased signage, yellow ditch lights, alternating lights, and speed radars with signage that, of course, would be more encouraging for motorists to slow down. So I thank you for listening to my comments, and that's quite simply all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Number 3. All right. I believe we have number 4. Oh, sorry. Just kidding. I skipped over Mike.
So I appreciate your comments about that project in San Francisco and some of the safety features. There's a couple safety improvements that the department has tried to implement to help here. I don't know that they've had this desired success that you would hope. Number 1 is reducing the speed limit. And there is a speed zone through this section. I've been doing this for quite a number of years, and the only real thing I've ever retained from a mentor of mine is nobody does anything for a piece of aluminum on a stick. And so we can set any speed zones we want. People drive according to what they feel is the appropriate speed to drive at, right? Now, beyond that, one of the things that if you're driving that and you're not taking your eye off the road and you're seeing it, you'll notice that there is reflectors that are glued to the barrier all the way through the curves. The department cannot keep those glued to the barrier because the vehicles go up and scrape them off because they keep running into it and scraping it off. So just a couple anecdotes to kind of demonstrate a little bit of your point.
Okay, now we're ready for number 4.
Hi, I'm number 4. I'm Veronica Lerma, and I own a property on South Broadway, and I feel like South Broadway isn't even being considered, and it's been a problem for 75 years when my parents were alive, and they lived there, and my younger brother was hit by a car at that time. Since then, there are accidents, speeding cars hit cars that are parked on Broadway. Pedestrians are getting hit. So I would like to propose that the boundaries be changed and all those wonderful things that you're going to do in that little study area, that the boundary is extended to Broadway, since we've been complaining about it for so long, and to Gibson. The on-ramp to the freeway is on Gibson, and it's on Avenida Cesar Chavez. And the traffic, since I grew up there as a little girl, and it's worse now. It's congested, and they're speeding like 50, 60 miles an hour. And we've been complaining about it forever. City councilors come and go, mayors come and go, and they all promise when they're campaigning that they're going to do something about it, but nobody ever does anything about it. And now I see all these wonderful changes that are going to happen, and I'm sure it's not just because the new In-N-Out burger is going to open up in that area. And there's a Starbucks, and all of a sudden, it all stops right there by the freeway, the area that extends to Gibson. Right there where all these new businesses are. Well, Broadway is lined with businesses too, and residents, and there's pedestrians. Please just consider extending that boundary. That's all I can say. That's my question. Would you please consider We'll put or maybe we'll have the In-N-Out Burger put over there on South Broadway.
Thank you so much for your questions. From a public engagement standpoint, I do want to just make a couple of comments. We are really ensuring that we are trying to make equitable outreach and develop relationships with all you wonderful people. And we've established some really good relationships. I see a couple of my little friends speckled in here. But also from a personal perspective, I too am raised around this area. I'm from here, so we understand and we hear you. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic back to Mike.
You and I chatted quite a bit over in the open house, and I appreciate it. And I believe what you're saying. We have a bit of a challenge with this project. Actually, Broadway itself falls outside of New Mexico DOT's jurisdiction. But I did promise you that I would make sure that your concerns are heard, right? That's what I can promise you. And the most vexing question I've heard all night, I have no idea where the In-N-Out Burger's going.
That's where it's going.
Okay, is it one right there? Okay. So I don't know if you noticed, there, right on the other side of that wall, kind of just this way of the door, there's a board and a table about Gibson. So the Department of Transportation does have a project that's moving forward to reconstruct the I-25 corridor along with the Gibson interchange, and also extending as far south as Sunport and extending as far north as Cesar Chavez. It does not include a full reconstruction of Cesar Chavez. That's probably going to be addressed with this S-curve project, but it will address ramps and reconstructing ramps and the entire between Cesar Chavez and Sunport, and then the entire interchange of Gibson and a portion of Gibson as well. So you and I can meet over at that after this, maybe. Okay.
All right, number 5. Oh, he beat me up there.
My name is Felipe Venegas, and I live over there by the freeway. Aquí está mi vecina, aquí está mi esposa, aquí está mi hija. Y si van a extender el freeway hacia el oeste, va a molestar a las propiedades. ¿Qué piensan hacer?
I'm here with my wife, I'm here with my daughter, and if you do decide to extend the freeway to the west, we live on properties there. What are you going to do with those properties?
Thank you for that question. I will go ahead and hand it back over to our one and only Mike.
I don't know that that's what will happen. Like I said, with this study, we are going to consider a range of alternatives. We'll probably look at what that looks like to go west, and so we'll consider that and assess the impacts of that one way or another. I don't know that that's what will happen. If it does happen, there is a prescribed process for which the department acquires right-of-way for projects. And you and I can talk about that in more details, it's probably beyond the time we want to get into with this. If you and I want to have a conversation where we can talk about what that process is, if you're really interested in that. But at this point, we don't know that that's what's going to happen.
Una de las cosas que más molesta es el ruido. Nosotros tenemos allí viviendo 44 años y cuando pasa un accidente, a la mitad de la noche nos despierta.
Deja interpretar eso y one of the things that most bothers us living over there is the noise. We've been living over there for 44 years, and when an accident happens on the freeway, it wakes us up in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't doubt that. Yeah. So again, noise is a very important part of what we have to consider with this. A little background. Part of I think the frustration from the neighborhoods about why there isn't noise walls or noise barriers today is because the department doesn't know what the highway is going to look like until the study's done in order to be able to put noise walls in the right and most appropriate locations. So that's part of what we have to come up with when we actually identify what the solution is. We will assess and model the noise and anticipate what the noise is, and then identify specific measures to mitigate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Next, we'll go to our original number 5.
Number 5. Of the 3 accessibility solutions and the 5 non-motorized transportation alternatives, they look like they would take up different amounts of real estate east to west. So could you speak to those, which ones would take up the most and how it relates to the current east-west footprint?
All right, so just to repeat the question to make sure everybody heard, the question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is going to be different widths as it takes up with whether it moves east or west, correct? All right.
Correct me if I get this wrong, but this from like Lomas to the south to where the on-ramp gets in going southbound from Central, right? So the whole area from like where the Presbyterian Church is and then extending south adjacent through Central past where Presbyterian Hospital is, in that area, it's pretty uniform in width, and that includes the freeway that's up elevated and then the frontage roads on the sides. That width, I believe, is about 400 feet wide today. And so if we could probably, if we were to implement the frontage roads adjacent to the freeway, we could probably expect a similar type of width through that area. With some of the other ideas we talked about, mentioned the collector distributor roads, that takes up quite a bit of extra, that's quite wider footprint. And the exact number I would guess, and I wouldn't get it right, but it's quite a bit wider. So does that help? Does that? Yeah.
Okay, number 6.
Good evening. My name's Anthony Fisher. I'm a resident of the neighborhood, and I'd like to ask, well, according to the website Better Berkey, which is not mine, I'm not making a plug for it, the NMDOT ran the S-curve project through with little debate in 1956. The impacts on the study area's historic neighborhoods were frequently negative. Your proposals say the widening of intersections, the widening of lanes in the surface streets could have the same impact 60-plus years later. My question is, why should we, the residents of the study area's historic neighborhoods, trust NMDOT today? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is a great question. With that being said, I'm actually going to hand this mic over to Summer so she can go ahead and address that.
Thank you very much for your comment and your concerns about the study process. As you can see tonight, we have a lot of information available, and we're hoping to bring you on this journey with us and really promote transparency in this process. So the study team is very, and the DOT is very committed to transparency. Regarding making wider facilities, we definitely haven't made any determination that we're going to be widening anything for sure. That's all still in the works and not predetermined at this time. So we'll be assessing the existing conditions, gathering data, and seeing what are the transportation needs before we start looking at footprints. Anything to add?
No, the only thing I can add, that the freeway was built in 1961. That predates me a little bit. That was the year I was born. So I can't exactly answer why, what was done, and who was responsible for it. So I apologize for that. But all I can say is we're here as a part of this process, and we want to involve, without the community being involved and giving us feedback all the way through, it's not going to be as good a process or as constructive of a decision and an informed decision as it should be. So please stay involved.
Thank you, Summer and Mike. Also, just so you know that this is the beginning of the study, right? So we're still in the beginning phase. So as Mike said, stay involved and follow us through this journey. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next question, which is question number 7.
Hi, thank you. Would you mind moving back to the slide with the sort of the overall schedule, including the draft environmental impact statement?
Absolutely. You have to bear with me because it's a lot of slides.
I know.
But as I'm looking for those, can you get that, Nicole? Sorry, we were playing musical chairs earlier.
Yeah, all good. I mean, I can go ahead with my question. I think I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your plan to, and also your legal obligation to respond to public comments, particularly those related to adverse impacts and displacement at sort of each stage in the process.
So I'm hearing a couple of questions. So I'm hearing one, what is our legal obligation to respond to public comment? Is that correct?
Yeah, per the NEPA process.
Oh, with our NEPA process. Actually, we happen to have a NEPA expert here. I'm going to go ahead and let Nicole answer those questions for you.
So right now, we're using any public comments that we have to help inform and shape the process. We want to understand what your concerns are, what are we not aware of that we need to be aware of as we start this process, and then we'll use those comments, like I said, to help shape and inform the solution and the process and the analysis. When we move into the NEPA phase, we'll have a public hearing, and we are required to respond to all of those comments. To respond to those comments.
And is there sort of any legal obligation about kind of documenting adverse impacts that people bring up and responding to those once it enters the NEPA process, like between the draft and the final environmental impact statement?
Yes, we will definitely, when we receive comments like on the draft environmental document or the environmental document, we'll take those into account, and if needed, we will go back and look at if we need to reanalyze some of the resources that we've looked at, reanalyze some of the impacts. And so, yes, we will take a look at that. And we are required by NEPA to take a look at what our proposed action is what the impacts are to the environment as a result of the proposed action, and that's all documented.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next, we have question number 8.
Hello, my name's Amanda. I live on High Street, just west of the S-curve. So part of my question got answered by the other individual in regards to your footprint and how much the surface street accessibility and the I-25 accessibility could increase the footprint, correct? So it could end up coming over into the High Street area. Is that a possibility? I mean, I know that's a hard one to answer, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly anything's possible. What I can say is we are going to consider those to make sure that we understand the impacts of that.
Right.
So I'm gonna add a little bit to the last answer. So NEPA stands for the National Environmental Policy Act, right? And what it is, and this is how I think about it. Sometimes I feel like the use of the word environmental conjures all sorts of images in people's brains and of what the process is. The way I like to understand it is NEPA dates back 1969, signed by President Nixon. But it requires any federal agency to before they make a decision or make use of federal funds, that they have to conduct a process to, number one, make sure that the decision or the money that's being used is being used in a manner for which the legislation which designated it was intended. Like the money's getting used for the way Congress intended it to be used. And number two, that there are no unintended consequences of that decision. So what that essentially means is, and we talked a lot about purpose and need, right? That's really defining why improvements are necessary. And that's a really important part of it because it also translates to, are we doing an action for which the money was intended to be spent for? So then beyond that, the no unintended consequences part of it is that it doesn't mean that there's not impacts, but then when we make a decision, that we make a decision in full light and knowledge of what those impacts are, and that we do that in a transparent way that people can comment and provide feedback on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps. I don't know if that even.
Well, I'm just curious about, because of your diagrams here and the width, so I'm like, that width can actually increase dependent upon the other.
It could. There's nothing magical about those widths.
Right.
Yeah. So there was two diagrams. Which one are you looking at?
Well, I'm looking at all three.
You're looking at the one with the three. So there's two diagrams. I wanted to explain one that you're not showing. One was just the study area, because there's been some questions about the study area, and it's a big, broader area. I think it goes from Walter over, and I can't remember actually how far. That doesn't mean, the only thing that means is that is the area where we're gathering data to consider. There's nothing magical about that. That's an envelope for which we're gathering information. We're identifying where the home.
It could be changed. What this is indicating
those
here
are not meant to
could
be any.
Could be changed though, depending on these other criteria that might be added or taken away.
It's possible.
Okay.
Yes.
Then what I just want to add in there is about the wall, the
noise wall
for the noise. To also take into consideration, the corridor is also, I know LA had a big problem with this, and that was lungs problem with their, was it brake dust and exhaust and all that?
Yeah.
So because that, if it's widened, we may be even closer to the freeway than we were before, being on High Street. So I just want it taken into consideration, not just noise, but also maybe a lot of like pine trees, fir trees. They found that the larger ones can take in some of that exhaust and things like that and help with our lungs and all that type of thing. So
that's really good, and I appreciate that a lot.
Okay.
It's really good. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff you don't want a part of that comes off of the freeway.
Yeah,
right?
environmentally.
Right.
Yeah. And it causes lung damage. Thank you.
Number 9.
Good evening. I guess I'm not sure if I'm question number 9 or questionnaire number 9. My name is Stan Peplinski. I do not live in the immediate area. However, I've moved to Albuquerque in 1978 from a small place called Chicago, Illinois. So I've had prior experiences with high-volume traffic, congestion on freeways, and a thing called the S-curve on Lakeshore Drive. And that was there originally and no longer exists, but that was rebuilt probably about 30 years ago. So I wanted to ask you is that, first of all, I've sent some comments to you in your email, your study email. And since I'm the last speaker, would the audience and you mind more than one question or comment?
Sure.
Okay, that's what I was saying. It's question number 9. Thank you.
I have to defer to Magic Mike here.
Thank you. If you could put up your schedule there again, please. My question goes to this, is you show the schedule, which is and also the previous slide, going back to 2014, I believe, where you had a series of these studies, and so starting in 2014, or the latest series of studies going back to 2014, we're now here in 2023, so we're here 9 years later in these studies. Can you give an estimate as to when you will actually start construction? How long will do you anticipate the construction take, and your anticipated completion?
Kick me if I misspeak, Summer, but so I can give you an estimate.
Right.
Okay. So all of this, and I can understand that things are frustratingly slow with stuff like this. The biggest limitation that exists for stuff like this is money, right, and flow of money. Very few of us have much say or input or leverage into how money flows into infrastructure projects or projects like this. Now, that being said, this district of NMDOT District 3, which is the Albuquerque area, they have a funding stream, but they also have other projects that are in the pipeline that consume that funding. There are two other significant projects that are planned in the corridor, in the immediate I-25 corridor. The first one is north of I-40, be the basically Comanche Road, Montgomery Boulevard area being rebuilt. That construction will start sometime next year. So that project is moving. There is another project, which is I-25 reconstruction of the Gibson interchange, and that's what Greg's project is that will be, that extends from basically the north side of Sunport to the south side of Cesar Chavez. That will not start until that Comanche Montgomery project is complete because it's just too impactful. There was a comment about construction traffic before. It's too much strain on the system to have two projects on the I-25 corridor at one time just for traffic impacts. That project is not funded right now. We don't know what the funding is and we don't know what the timing of that is. However, the department is planning to begin that sometime, late 2026? The S-curve project, this project schedule that we showed up here is the schedule for the study. It's not for the implementation of the project. The S-curve would not begin until after the Gibson reconstruction would start, only because, well, two reasons. Number one, flow of money. And number two, just to not have more than one major project like that along the I-25 corridor impacting traffic. That's an educated guess. It's not an absolute answer because, again, it depends on the flow of the money, which we don't necessarily control.
Okay, thank you for your honest answer. I was looking for an approximate date, but thank you for your honest answer. Speaking of budgets, what is the anticipated cost or cost range of the S-curve realignment? Because I know that from a government standpoint, before you undertake even a study, you have to have some idea of what the cost range is to see what the monies would be and where that money would be coming from.
Yeah. Hopefully I give you an equally satisfying answer with this one. I'll talk from my recent experience with what I refer to as the Comanche Montgomery project. That's about 2.5 miles of the interstate corridor, including reconstruction of two interchanges. That total project cost is, this is round numbers, roughly $200 million. Okay? That project is not as complicated as the S-curve area. So if you can kind of use your scale and judgment about that, but we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
So it would be easy to estimate that if combined S-curve realignment and Gibson Chavez interchange reworked together would be about $1 billion?
Be about how much?
About $1 billion.
I don't know I don't know if that's the right number or not, but I'm trying to give you orders of magnitude. We don't have, and we don't know what's getting built, so we don't know what the actual cost estimate is. But I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions.
Thank you. Along that budget line, do we have, especially since you're in District 3, do you have any idea what other lines of funding you could tap into?
I think everybody has heard in the news of the infrastructure bill, right, that's out there. I'm not an expert in that. That has increased some flow of money and increased some funding around. There is also a number of grant projects or grant programs that are out there to fund large-scale projects. And the department has applied for those and has not been successful. They are highly competitive programs, and there's a ton of competition for those countrywide, and that's about as far the extent of my knowledge on it. So,
Thank you. If I may ask one more question,
sure.
and the others I'll send to you. Thank you.
Open house, but
With the recent invention or demonstration of flying automobiles, is your study taking into consideration how the I-25 or any highway within the city could be impacted by flying cars and the design of the highways?
I'm certainly not an expert in it. It hasn't been a consideration thus far, right? Now, outside of flying cars, probably the more emerging consideration is intelligent transportation, intelligent vehicles. And there is an awful lot of research going on. Actually, how that is being applied on a project-by-project level, it hasn't made it to that point yet. But DOTs across the country are having to consider what that might mean for them in the future so that they don't build things now that might preclude it. Does that make sense?
Quite understandable, since they've been doing that in California since 1985.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, everybody, for all of your wonderful comments and questions this evening. There was a lot of information that was presented tonight, and we want to make sure that everybody has a thorough understanding of the information. So we are going to dismiss us into the open house. So if you do have a little bit more time in your evening, please stick around, take a look at the boards, and chat with our team, and ask specific questions. And if you don't have any questions tonight, or you think of something later, I do want to just end this with how to submit a public comment again. I know we went through this, but again, this is something we really, really want to emphasize, is that we have to hear back from you guys. We need that feedback and that input. So today, we've got all of your questions and all of your questions. Also, if you didn't submit or if you did not ask a question, be sure that you submit a survey or fill out a comment form. And later on, feel free to utilize our website, our hotline, our email address, or even our snail mail. Thank you, and we'll go ahead and move into our open house.